Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, a webinar which is organized by Chandigarh Judicial Academy in collaboration with SCC Online. Today's webinar is on journal shortcomings and flaws in criminal proceedings by Honorable Mr. Justice S.S. Saran sir. I think Saran sir doesn't need any introduction. Everyone knows him. He's been a part of the judiciary and has worked in different positions wherein he has done his bit. But I think as the protocol goes, I have to, follow the protocol. So I'll just give a small brief about Sir. Saran Sir was born on September 4th of 1955 and had enrolled as an advocate on September 18th, 1980. His Lordship started his practice at Sangrur and conducted many cases on civil, criminal, and service matters. His Lordship was also appointed as Assistant Advocate General, Deputy Advocate General, and Additional Advocate General, Punjab. His Lordship was elevated as a permanent judge of Punjab and Haryana High Court on July 2nd, 2002. His Lordship retired as acting Chief Justice of Punjab and Haryana High Court on September 3rd, 2017. And since then, Sir has been very instrumental in sharing of knowledge. I was talking to Sir before the session started, and Sir was saying that now it's the time to give back to the society, to give back to the fraternity. So I think that being the base for today's session, I will now request Saran sir to please start and bless us with his wisdom. Sir, over to you.
Very good morning to all of you, and welcome to this new generation technology of having webinars while sitting at your home. Mr. Chetan Singh Gill, thank you so much for the introduction that you have given. The difficulty is that one is not able to reach out to the participants as one is more used to in a physical and partic where you can get the pulse of the people of those. So, but I understand that all the participants are mostly of the rank of judicial magistrates and the superior judiciary of the additional district and session judges. The topic which one has chosen is general flaws and shortcomings in criminal proceedings. See, I wish to emphasize to each one of you that law, everyone will tell you what it is. The lawyers will tell you the law. They will cite the provision regarding law. But where an officer's ability and capability come out is deficiency at times in the procedural law. And that is where we have to focus ourselves. And that is where we wish to enlighten these webinars and our meetings. They are only as a matter of knowing our deficiencies, knowing our shortcomings, and to how to improve ourselves. So, times are changing and expectancy on the judiciary is now far more than what it was earlier. Gone are the days when the person you could just say, all right, go inside for a certain time and we will see what is to be done later. Today, a person wants that he should be given the right of freedom. He's more conscious of his rights. The lawyers are more aggressive and the challenge has increased many-fold more than what it was several years ago. So now I will try and cover up both the sides. Now, when I am talking of the procedure before the magistrate, the superior judicial officers may think that it doesn't concern us, that we are at this thing. But let me assure you that it does concern you because it is the flaws and the mistakes that are committed by the lower judiciary that are to be corrected in exercise of provisional jurisdiction by the officers of the superior judiciary. So now, what I have seen, I've come straight to the topic. What I have seen is where the mistakes occur primarily. See, everything starts, all the criminal law sets in motion with the lodging of a complaint and registration of a FIR under section 154 of the Code of Criminal Procedure sets in motion the criminal law and the criminal justice. The complaint at times is not registered and the person approaches the magistrate under 153 CRPC for registration of a FIR against the person, taking the stand that the police is not registering the FIR and it has resulted in prejudice. The magistrate starts with the process. He or she has two options. One is to order the registration of FIR. Second is to get a report from the police officer. And third is to start recording evidence. Now, in case the magistrate starts recording evidence, then he feels that no, it was unnecessary and I should have asked for a report. Earlier in Muhammad Shafiqu's case, this was considered not to be practicable. This was considered that it may not, once you start criminal proceedings, you cannot do it. After that, the judgment has come in Supreme Court in Parivartan Samudaya, where even after recording some evidence, the magistrate can refer it to the police for a report. It is invariably safe to get a report because the police may not be registering a FIR because it was found to be that no cognizable offence is made. So, one of the fundamental things where, though we all have studied is in criminal law, in our law colleges, and even now we are, but sometimes it just skips out of our mind as to what is a cognizable offence. You must have the CRPC at times, all the time with you. Cognizable offence is defined in the CRPC. Section 2 contains the definition, which says that where a police may arrest without a warrant. The table is given at the end where the offences are bailable, triable by which court, warrant or. So you have to go by whichever cases are where a police can arrest without a warrant is a cognizable offence. In cases of non-cognizable offence, police cannot register FIR or investigate except with the permission of the magistrate under section 155(2). See, the magistrate's competency and the mistakes which are to be corrected by the superior judiciary are evident from the fact that the magistrate is competent in his work. And let me assure you, the more you are familiar with the procedural law, the more competent you are considered and more respect you get. The respect is not there just merely for the chair that you are holding. The respect is for your competence, hard work, and your due diligence to the duty, which can only be brought about by your competence in the field by exhibiting complete knowledge of procedural law, which is there. So with this, so this is one aspect. And then another where many magistrates have made a mistake is to ascertain as to where the accused is from. Is he within the jurisdiction or beyond the jurisdiction? If the accused is beyond the jurisdiction, mandatorily there has to be a preliminary inquiry before you submit. So preliminary inquiry you have to conduct under section 204 of the, no, 202 of the postponement of process. So it says, if he thinks and shall, in a case where the accused is residing at a place beyond the area in which he exercises his jurisdiction, postpone the issue of process against the. So this insertion at a place beyond the area in which he exercises jurisdiction has been introduced with effect from 23rd of June 2006. It's a recent amendment. Why this amendment has been brought into effect is because many of the litigants are misusing this provision. They have. I remember one case I did. The person was carrying out some construction work in Baroda, and he had a dispute with the person in Baroda, and he came and registered a complaint in the jurisdiction of police station Amlo in Ludhiana. And that person had never even heard of Ludhiana and never been to Amlo. So he was summoned by the magistrate from Ludhiana, from Baroda. In this manner, what happened? Just 1 minute.
Sir, I'll take care. I'll tell Sukhvinder about this, sir.
Just 1 minute. I'll just. Sorry. So I was continuing that this person came from Baroda and he brought all the way to Ludhiana and he did not go. So there were many instances like this, due to which in the year 2006, that wherever a person is to be summoned beyond jurisdiction, some sort of a preliminary inquiry is got conducted. Many of the courts, many of the magistrates have overlooked this provision, which results in the orders being satisfied at the higher form, which delays the proceedings, which does not subserve the cause of judicial process. So one flaw, the first and foremost, is that whenever a complaint is filed, you please look at the accused whether they are within the jurisdiction of the court, and in case they are beyond the jurisdiction of the court, they have to be, a preliminary inquiry is mandatory in terms of section 202 CRPC. The further procedure, next procedure, it's only a refreshing of what is always there and in your mind. But if we are able to refresh the procedure, we are able to, understand the basic difficulty and improve ourselves. It is when the person, after the registration of the FIR, he is branded as a crook, a thief, and a chore, and whatnot, and his police is treating him in a shabby manner that you have done this, you have done this. The complainant is there at his head. The first suku that he gets after all this is when he appears before the magistrate. Now, at this time, he comes for a remand. Many a times, the magistrate just takes the paper and on the top of it scribbles it and remand. How many days? 2 days. This is 4 days remand. No, what do you want 4 days for? You take 2 days. 2 din ka kafi. And you pass it on with that, on the slip of paper. Now, here some exercise needs to be done, and the papers need to be looked into. And I want to bring to your notice a very judgment which is very, very old of the Allahabad High Court. The Bir Bhadra Pratap Singh versus DM Azamgarh. It's a 1958 judgment, and it is available on 1958 SCC online Allahabad 183 of a division bench of the Allahabad High Court. In this case, what the facts were, that the petitioner, Bir Bhadra Pratap Singh, was a lawyer in the court at Azamgarh, and he was also a reporter from one newspaper with the name of Bharat. An incidental protest petition was raised in front of the office of the district magistrate at Azamgarh, and Bir Bhadra Singh sent the report to. Before he could send the report, he was told, given the official version by the DM, and told that the report is to be in this manner and none other. Since he was present, he chose that it should be presented in the manner he saw it, and which he did. Then he was told to be careful in future and told to and reprimanded by the police. But he continued, and he was arrested and then produced before the magistrate. The magistrate on the piece of paper recorded remanded for custody. He filed a habeas corpus petition challenging that this is an illegal detention. So now, as far as 1958, the division bench of the Allahabad High Court laid down the procedure as to what should be done, and which is very, very relevant even on date. And in fact, it is more relevant today because the judiciary today performs a proactive role and is the harbinger of supporting and safeguarding the rights of the litigants, of the general public, and is looked upon at high esteem. So this function which the judiciary performs is to be written. Now, I wish to say that I'll just read out from para 18, the relevant part. It says, before we come to scrutinize whether or not the production of the accused before the magistrate was in accordance with law, we should like to draw the attention to one fact which in our opinion deserves special attention. The learned magistrate in this case made the order of remand on a small sheet of paper. The order was produced before us by Mr. Uniyal, though it had not been attached to the return as it should have been. That order did not contain any specific direction of the magistrate in regard to the detention of the petitioner in jail, nor did the order clearly indicate the period for which the petitioner was to be detained. Then in Allahabad, they had forms in which had to be done. But what is of essence is that there must be reasons recorded in the order at the time of remand. It magistrates should not get impressed by the salute that the police officer who comes to them. Those are all generally fake and fabricated and more in the nature of deceive the court than to produce the actual thing. So here then the court goes on to discuss Article 22, sub-article 2 of the Constitution, and also Section 51 of the old Code of Procedure, which is now equivalent to Section 57, which requires that the person shall not be detained before beyond a period of 24 hours. Then further the court says, after referring to Article 22, it says Section 167 of the Code. Now, this is the old Code, but Section 167 is the same in the new Code of 1973 also. Makes a further provision that along with the accused person will be forwarded to the magistrate a copy of the entries in the diary. This clearly indicates that the purpose of producing an accused before a magistrate is to ensure that the arrest and detention of the accused person is at any rate prima facie justified. So this has to be prima facie justified, and in case it is not done, that order can be assailed even before the Superior Court of Sessions Court in exercise of provisional jurisdiction under Section 397 of the Code of Criminal Procedure. So, another aspect I want to emphasize is that everything mostly is provided in the Code of Criminal Procedure itself. But what we have a tendency to do is to straightaway jump to the Supreme Court judgments, and then, the lawyer comes with the case that he says, Your Honor, this case is covered by the Supreme Court judgment. And we suddenly start going by the Supreme Court judgment, and he then comes to the facts. Whereas I request all of you to proceed step by step. First the facts, then the legal provision applicable to those facts, and then the case law of the Supreme Court. But we are overburdened by the High Court and Supreme Court judgments. They say, Your Honor, it is covered by this case. He comes and starts the argument by saying that it is covered by this case, and we are then left with no choice, but we get stuck in that. So first and foremost is what are the facts, which is the procedure of law applicable under the IPC or the CRPC, and then what is the case law. So please proceed in this manner. So therefore, you see that the person who has come here is firstly the person who is to be taken as a accused, and that you must see the case diaries. Now, I want to bring to your notice another important amendment with regard to case diaries. This is also relevant for the Superior Judicial Services officers where the cases are triable by where cognizance is taken by the court itself under the Prevention of Corruption Act cases, and even in case of committal cases which are committed by the magistrate to the Sessions Court for trial, and even under the Narcotics, Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act cases, the importance of these case diaries. Now, I kindly come to section 172 of the CRPC. Diary of proceeding in investigation. Subsection 1A and 1B have been added. These have been added on 31/12/2009, and they have been added with a purpose. 1A says the statement of witnesses recorded during course of investigation under section 161 shall be inserted in the case diary. And 1B is the diary referred to in subsection 1 shall be a volume and duly paginated. Mostly the papers which are presented before the trial magistrates or the trial courts in the Court of Session, they are loose sheets without pagination and without. Then earlier the practice was, and now many magistrates and even trial courts have resumed, is of signing those case diaries. The purpose of recording the statements under 161 in the case diaries is that when these are presented before the magistrates during the remand of the accused, these are generally signed by the magistrates, and these should be signed by the magistrate so that the statement cannot be inserted later. See, that is the purpose of it, so that the investigation of the case, the magistrate does not interfere in the investigation. He is not expected to. But he is to be kept in the picture at all stages of the case so that the police are bound within the realm of the magistrate. And wherever the police transgresses its prescribed limits of jurisdiction, the magistrate is to and should and must interfere in the case and pull up the police officer. So it is when you are able to ensure that these courts will be, your court is following the procedure. There will be appreciation in your work. There will be due compliance with the law by the police, and you would not be taken lightly. The moment you are slack, the moment you are casual in your approach, there will be laxity in the police, and the administration of justice will suffer. So this procedural law is only to ensure that the justice is not only done, but is not only seen to be done, but is effectively and substantially done. So these case diaries, as held by the division bench of the Allahabad High Court in Bir Batra Singh's case, evidently show that these are important and they have to be taken into consideration at that time, and these must be examined, and only then so it should not be just that the person is arrested, because what the court says is in this very judgment of the Allahabad High Court, what the court further says is, therefore, that obligation the law placed on the magistrate, it was for the magistrate to decide, though premises on certain material placed before him, namely the material contained in the diary relating to the case, whether or not the detention in prison of an accused was necessary. In coming to his conclusion, the magistrate had, in our opinion, to exercise his mind, his judicial mind, and only when the magistrate could and did apply that mind, that it could be said that the order made by the magistrate for the detention in prison of a person was a valid one. We cannot contemplate that the intention of the legislature in making this provision was merely to provide for order, which, in the words of Lord Goddard, made them rubber stamp orders. So remand orders are not rubber stamp orders, where the police is used to said ki jabe iske remand le aao, and he takes it, goes to the court, gives a good salute, puts up the paper, and the magistrate writes 2 days, and that's the end of the matter. These require exercise of judicial mind. These require exercise of examination of case diary. What is the offence against the accused? Whether it is bailable or non-bailable, whether the police were cognizable or non-cognizable, and whether the offence is punishable with less than 7 years of imprisonment. The judgment in Arnesh Kumar versus State of Bihar is all very well known to you, that wherever in 498A, 406 cases, and in the cases of offences less than 7 years, it must be seen whether the provisions of the CRPC have been followed, and the police is required in the first instance to issue a notice under 41B of the CRPC. So these are also newly added section, the 41A, which has been added in the CRPC in 2010. You see, 41B, procedure of arrest and duty of officer making. Then 41D, right of arrested person to meet an advocate of his choice during interrogation. See, now these important provisions, see, earlier the criminal law was based on the need of the British rulers. They wanted a law by which they could control the subjects, the Indian subjects. Today we have the constitution which gives right to the accused, right to the complainant, and fairness of trial to all. So those rights must be ensured. And today it is, person doesn't, earlier it was considered that one illiterate amongst illiterate, that we have to go to prison. This is the way we are to be treated. Today, the citizen is conscious. The educated one says, why am I being sent to the prison? Why am I being detained under security? And this is where the role of the courts come in relation to the judgment in Arnesh Kumar reiterating the requirements to be followed in 41A, 41B, and 41D of the newly added CRPC with effect from 2010. Despite the amendments being carried out 10 years back, and despite the judgment in Arnesh Kumar versus State of Bihar being there, this is not being followed in letter and spirit because of our mindset in the applicability of this law. I request all of you to please go through the law, please comply with the requirements of law so that the procedural provisions are followed and you are considered one amongst the competent court for conduct. Now, moving further, because the time is too short, another aspect I wish to point out where the law has been coupled to deal slightly with the officers of the superior judiciary is that where a person has been discharged by the trial magistrate and the complainant files a revision. The procedure in a complaint case, everyone knows that it is to be tried either as a summons case or a warrant case or a summary trial. In case it is a warrant case, then after recording evidence, the magistrate finds no ground to summon. He dismisses the complaint. The complaint files a revision before the session court, and the session court, many a time it has happened that it does not summon the accused, and it summons the accused without hearing him. Now, even the reason that mostly is taken by many is that since he was not summoned as an accused at the initial stage, and there was no requirement, so there is no need to summon him, and there is no need to hear him. But here, and there are judgments to the contrary. One judgment initially said it can be done since he was not called. Then later on, the Supreme Court clarified that no, you have to hear him, he has the right. But see, again, I want to bring you to the bare provisions of the CRP itself so that you are not overwhelmed by the judgments that are cited. In section 401, which is the jurisdiction of the High Court to summon, and it is applicable into even session court. Section 399 talks of session judges' powers of revision. See, section 401 2 says no order under this section shall be made to the prejudice of the accused or other person unless he has had an opportunity of being heard either personally or by pleader in his own defense. So, and this part of the High Court under 401 in terms of 399(2), it says where any proceeding by way of revision is commenced before a session judge under subsection 1, the provisions of subsection 2, 3, and 4, and 5 of section 401 shall, so far as may be, apply to such proceedings when references to the said subsection to the High Court shall be construed as reference to the sessions judge. So 401(2), which is power of revision before the High Court, is applicable even in revisional jurisdiction under 399(2) of the Sessions Court. So what it comes out is that in case the person, an order is to be passed to his prejudice, then he is to be called before that order is passed. And in case the order of dismissal of the complaint is to be upheld by the session court, there is no need to summon. So the session court should not act merely in routine to issue notice to the respondent or the accused. In case prima facie it is found that there is merit in the contentions that are raised by the complainant revision petitioner, notice before an order, passing an order prejudicial to him, notice must be issued. Because what we do, earlier judgment was there is no need, next judgment comes, there is need. But the bare provisions of the Code of Criminal Procedure are so clear, and this is what my emphasis is, that we must go by the bare provisions of the Act. And the more you can learn on them, you will be able to understand that these are indeed applicable to court of session without the need of going into any authority or any judgment of any court of the high, be that of the High Court or the Supreme Court, because the substantive provisions of law are clear. So this is another aspect which I have noticed in many cases where the courts have at the session trial court, that even after the dismissal of a complaint by the trial magistrate, they have summoned the respondent accused without notice to him. He summoned him in the, not for hearing of the revision, but summoned him for the offense which is attributed to him. This, in fact, would be highly improper. You can pass an order to his prejudice only after hearing him, in view of the provisions of Section 4012 CRPC, which are applicable to revisional jurisdiction of the Sessions Court under Section 399 CRPC. So these procedural aspects, though we are all very well aware of, but we tend to get a casual approach because of the pressure of work, because of the heavy board, because of the other commitments, because of waiting of other litigants, because of the. So what should be generally emphasized is that the case diaries are presented, duly paginated, and in clear legible form which can be read and understood, so that there is no, these days typewriters are available. These must be signed. These must contain the statements of witnesses that have been recorded till the date of servicing. And these must be gone through to ascertain whether there is indeed a case, and they should not be mere rubber stamp orders on those cases. Then other aspects also I have in mind which I want to do, but I want participation of your people. So if you have any questions, I would welcome them, not only on this, but even other general questions which you may have on the procedural aspects. On see, bail is one of the aspects which I wish to emphasize on. Many people have been generally getting stuck on these bail matters. The Sessions Court people are feeling that they generally don't pass, and we have to ultimately go to the High Court. These bail provisions, I wish to just give you the citation which has come out very, very recently. One is of the, many of you may be knowing them, but the 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court on anticipatory bail matters in Shushila Agarwal versus State and City of Delhi. The citation is 2020, Volume 5, SCC, page 1. In this case, the landmark decision of the Supreme Court in Gurbakh Singh Sibia's case, 1980 Supreme Court, has been reiterated and clarified. In between what had happened, certain judgments of the Supreme Court came, which somewhat tried to alter the legal position. That was that anticipatory bail cannot be for all times and it has to be limited duration. Two further judgments in Adri Tarandas, Nirmaljit Kaur, Sunita Devi versus State of Bihar. These then Salahuddin, These judgments did come, all these have been overruled now specifically, so that the basic requirement that it is only in exceptional cases you can limit it. But otherwise, these anticipatory bails now, as held in Gulbakht Singh Sibia, once granted, they continue. And then when the accused is produced, you take bail bonds under 309 2 CRPC. So this one judgment I wish all of you to go through. And another judgment which I want is that of Parvez Nuruddin Lokhandwal versus State of Maharashtra. This is 2020 SEC online Supreme Court page 807. This case, especially nowadays, many people in this part of the country, this is the case of Bombay, but in this part of the country, many people want to go abroad even though they are facing criminal charges. They have to go abroad to get revalidation of their green cards and, in Canada and America, because it is mandatory to stay in that country for that. They cannot go because of the criminal case filed by their relative. And so this judgment clearly laid on the conditions that these should generally be granted, although with circumspection. So this is one judgment which I want all of you to go through. And then another on the bail application, just to give you the citation, these are the latest ones. This is Vinubhai Haribhai Malviya versus State of Gujarat. This is citation FCC. Mr. Kapoor will give you the FCC citation, but it is in AIR 2019 SC 5233. Can you give the citation? Vinubhai Haribhai Malviya versus State of Gujarat. This is very recent, decided on 16/10/2019, only a year back. It gives a very fair amount of rights in the bail matter. Because we are generally getting stuck in these bail matters when we are unclear. So these latest judgments do clarify the provision. I won't go through them because that would take a bit too long. But I would like that we have questions, and I request that despite the fact that we are on virtual hearing, but that is the need of the time today because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And though it is not a substitute for a physical hearing where we can get a pulse of each other, but with the modern technology and with the modern decision, we have to change with the times and come to. So I request Mr. Gill that you please ask the officers to please ask questions, and I'm here to, so that there is participation.
Very well, sir. So first of all, thank you so much. And I think before I ask the question, I think there are a lot of regards have been sent across through the chat options. So thanks from a lot of members for coming out today and blessing us with all the wisdom. Like sir said, I'll go to the question, sir. We have a couple of questions. So I'll start with the first one, sir. The first question is from Mr. Ashwini Gupta, sir. Sir is asking that can report under section 202 of CRPC can be called even in exclusive session trial cases when accused is outside jurisdiction?
Yes, it can be called, because I wish to emphasize that each section which is there, it has a heading. Each section of the CRPC contains a heading. You must see under what heading, and that heading represents the stage at which the case is. You see, there is a stage, heading is warrants case. See, heading is at this thing. Now here 202 is complaints to magistrate. It does not relate to complaints to sessions court. So when the mostly complaints are filed to the magistrate in the initial, and then if the offence is triable by the court of session, it is committed to the court of session. In case of procedure under the where the magistrate takes cognizance, their complaints are rarely filed. Even if cases to be they are filed, see NDPS, nobody is going to file a complaint. Prevention of Corruption Act complaints can be filed. Then you have to come with the modified provisions of the Prevention of Corruption Act, depending on the special case in which the complaint is filed. So, see, when this chapter 15 starts complaints to magistrate, it does not relate to complaints to session. This, we come to the sections straight away without reading the chapter and the subheading. Another common defect which I have noticed is in the application of section 245. See, 245 section, he says when accused shall be discharged. 245(2) says nothing in this section shall be deemed to prevent a magistrate from discharging the accused at previous stage of the case if for reasons to be recorded such magistrate he considers charge to be groundless. Many magistrates have discharged the accused under 245(2) even in case. So now what is emphasis is just above section 244, you will read subheading B. It says cases instituted otherwise than on police report. So 244 and 245 is applicable in cases otherwise than on police report. It is not applicable in cases on police report. And you will see of chapter 19 when it says trial of a warrant case by a magistrate. And then subheading A says cases instituted on a police report. So 238 to 243 related cases on a police report. And 244 and 245 related cases instituted otherwise than on a police report. So, Mr. Ashwini, please see the heading of the chapter and not apply the provision as they are. You will find similar procedures in warrant cases, summon cases, and even sessions. See, each chapter begins with the heading complaints to magistrate on a police report other than police report. Please read the heading of the chapter and you will get your answer to this very, very clearly that where it is to be applied. And if it is in a case where the sessions court takes direct cognizance, then see the modified provisions to what extent the CRPC is applicable. And section 5 of the CRPC, nobody looks at section 5. So in the go to the later section. See, section 5 CRPC says section 4, sorry, not 5, section 4. It says trial of offensive under IPC and other law. So subsection 1, all offensive under IPC shall be investigated, inquired into, tried and otherwise dealt with according to the provisions hereinafter contained. So whatever is under the IPC, CRPC. Now 2 is very important, subsection 2. All offensive under other law. That is, other law is Prevention of Corruption Act, NDPS Act cases, or any other than the food adulteration cases, shall be investigated, inquired into, tried, and otherwise dealt with according to the same provision, but subject to any enactment for the time being in force, regulating the manner or place of investigating, inquiring into, trying, or otherwise dealing with such offences. So CRPC is applicable only to the extent the other law is silent, but it nevertheless applies. So modified application, you have provision in the NDPS Act, modified provisions of the CRPC. So CRPC applicable, but for the purpose of that it is modified. The period of remand is at times enhanced, the period of the thing. So this is, please see the heading of the chapter always, and you will get your clear answer at what stage. Otherwise, we always tend to ignore the heading of the chapter in the wish list provision. I hope that's
I think that answers a lot of questions. Sir, on the same lines, the question on section 202 is, in what manner and the procedure to conduct an inquiry under section 202?
Mostly manner you can conduct a preliminary inquiry by recording some statement of the witnesses. See, it can be sent to a magistrate. It can be from a magistrate to a police station of your area to submit a report. They can submit a report and you can hold. The difficulty arises mostly in cases under the Negotiable Instruments Act. There, you can examine one person in the nature of preliminary and satisfy yourself and say that I have conducted a preliminary inquiry, even the person, though he is beyond jurisdiction, he needs to be summoned, and then record the main statement. Or you can even send that to a police station depending on the nature of transaction involved. See, the difficulty mostly arises in the cases under the Negotiable Instruments Act. Otherwise, the police, to send a report, the police will make an inquiry and give a report whether what all he has investigated. He records the statement of the complainant and whom he needs, go and inquire from them whether they are required or not, what is the involvement. So this is the nature of the inquiry. By sending the report, it must be done under 202 wherever the accused is beyond the jurisdiction of the court, so that unnecessarily the person was not harassed and called by the court. Many cases times one finds that accused, he is general manager of the life insurance company and he is summoned to a court in Muksar or Palwal. The person doesn't even know what the case is and everything. So wherever the person is to be summoned beyond jurisdiction, police report can be asked for, police inquiry can be made. Difficulty may arise certainly in the negotiable instrument cases where it is a simple. Now, there in case it has to be a certain whether it is a debt or liability. Not a, it need not necessarily be. But at times you will find that along with 138 violation of 138, there are allegations of 420 and 409. In that case, police report can be filed. This is
so moving to the question, it says if all other papers in police diary are done, but the arrest in papers has not been reflected by the investigation officer, an accused has been produced in the court for remand, how the magistrate shall proceed with this situation?
The magistrate shall then say that I have to set him free, accept his bail bond and set him if the prima facie case is there. It has to be shown. The arrest has to be done under 41 of the CRPC. The guidelines laid down in D.K. Basu's case must be adhered to and followed. They must be done. In case those were not followed, in case the case is triable by the Sessions Court, a recommendation can be made to the Sessions Court for grant of bail, or the magistrate himself can release the person on bail in exercise of power under section 437, which magistrates normally do not do because they are always pulled up by the higher court. This is 437, the magistrate does have the power under 437, even in case of women, old, sick persons, they can do it in any case. But in other cases, they should also exercise their power and that or hold the detention to be illegal or tell him to please comply with the law. This is the basic requirement. Otherwise, 437, the magistrate does have the power, but it is rarely exercised by the magistrate that because they fear that tomorrow we may be held up for disciplinary action, for which the mindset of, I would say, even the High Court needs to change towards this so that this magistrates are not unnecessarily harassed in this manner. and they are able to exercise their jurisdiction more freely. But for the present, if you can, there's nothing illegal in it, but safer side, if you fear that you may be unnecessarily harassed, you can make a recommendation for the grant of bail to the court of session. You can make a reference. A reference can be made to the High Court even under section 113 of the Code of Criminal Procedure. No, not 113. 390, 113 of the CPC, I'm sorry. Yeah, this is the revisional jurisdiction. 395. 395 reference to the High Court. That can be done under 395 if you. But this is what you can and should do it. If you are otherwise 437, you read it carefully, you will find that these are the same. And then the CRPC gives complete answer to everything, but we don't read it because we are so enamored by judgments of the High Court and Supreme Court that we forget the basics and we go to the. If you read 437 clearly, I can give you an instance where during of the inspection, the magistrate had granted bail in a case which was triable by the Court of Session. 307 and 325 were there. The magistrate thought that only 325 was there, and the bail was granted by the magistrate. When the accused came to file demand, the magistrate, the bail bond, the magistrate realized that it should not have been granted. So the magistrate got confused and did not know what to do. And the bail bonds were not accepted because now on the one hand, the magistrate had passed an order of bail. On the other hand, the magistrate was not accepting the bail. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the magistrate, then that person went to the session court. The session judge, unfortunately, instead of correcting the order and helping the magistrate, confounded it more by saying that the magistrate can accept the bail bond for 325 but not under 307, which led to further predicament of the magistrate. And then the matter came to the High Court. My High Court said bail is granted in all cases and the magistrate shall. So that put an end. Then the accused gave a complaint that, look here, despite bail being granted, the magistrate did not accept my bail bond. So now the magistrate had exercised jurisdiction. If you read the provisions of the code, see 437. It says any court which has released a person on bail under subsection 1 or subsection 2 may, if it considers necessary so to do, direct that person be arrested and commit him to custody. So the court granting the bail can cancel the bail at any time under 437(5). All that the magistrate was required to do was that the bail has been inadvertently granted under 307. Therefore, the person is bail order is cancelled under 437(5) and he be taken into custody and the matter would have. But the poor magistrate did not know this and it resulted in great confusion and trouble. And then one had to guide the magistrate that, look here, this is how you have to go about it. So, these provisions, whenever you have difficulty, please read the provisions of whatever is applicable, and I assure you, you will find your remedy in it. In the case of bail, please read 437 in its entirety. In 145 proceeding, don't say that, think that the section is too long and I will go to sleep while reading it. It will give you your solution. This is the this is how.
So, as you were talking about the bail bonds, and so I'll pick up the question related to that itself. There are two parts to it. First part, the question is about whether a court generally release an accused on bail subject to furnishing personal bonds only, instead of filing of surety bonds in each and every such type of cases. That's the first part to it. And the second is that if upon acquittal, accused fail to furnish bail bond under section 437A, what action is required to be taken?
It is the personal bond or the surety is the sole discretion of the magistrate, which is to be exercised from case to case. Supposing the person is from outside the jurisdiction, mostly surety is asked. Then it depends even on the nature of the offence. In case it is a case of a murder, attempt to murder, or a thing, sureties are generally asked for so that he does not abscond. The basic thing which is to be kept in mind while the bail is to be granted is whether the accused would be available for trial, whether he is likely to abscond. That should be the basic, and this is what has been dealt with in these judgments which I am giving you in Parvez Nuruddin Lokhandwal, and there are two letters, and Vinubai Haribhai in relation to further investigation. You see where this judgment which has come now in Vinubai Haribhai Malviya versus State of Gujarat, this I just gave you, this is very, very essential in respect of further investigation. And I request all of you to please go through it in the where further investigation is to be where sanction of the magistrate is needed. These will always help you in your decision. This will clear the provision to you. So in the 437A, the next question is, then wherever, see, I'll tell you one provision of the CRPC which relates to the contempt of the. See, IPC Chapter 10. Chapter 10 of IPC says of contempt of lawful authority of public servants. You see, every court has this. See now, wherever a person absconding to avoid service or summons or other proceeding is dealt with under Section 172. Preventing service or summons or other proceedings or preventing publication thereof. See what happened, because the idea is also to share my personal experiences in these matters. One lawyer was having a divorce case against his wife. He was a lawyer, so he won this. With great difficulty, he was convinced to settle the matter. He agreed, and therefore we recorded his statement in the High Court.
Saran sir, I think we can't hear you, sir. There's something went wrong, sir. We can see you, but we can't hear you. Should I call Sukhvinder, sir? I can't hear you, sir. Let me call the IT person. सर ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਮੇਰੀ आवाज आ रही है ਉੱਥੇ? I think we're facing some technical issues, but I think it'll be sorted in a couple of few minutes. So
Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you, sir.
I was narrating the incident with the person lawyer who had come and appeared, and he was made to sign a statement, and he said, I just don't want to sign your statement, and you do whatever you like. This can happen in your court also. All the officers who are saying, he gives a statement, he says, Judge Sahab, aapne jo karna kar lo, maine nahi karna. Now, High Court, you have the power of contempt and you can issue contempt. The magistrates and the Sessions Court have to refer to it. But this chapter 10 of the IPC, see, it says, section 180 says, refusing to sign a statement. If a person refuses to sign a statement, you file a complaint against him. So wherever this kind of difficulty arises that a person does not fail to summon the give bail bonds, then the procedure is chapter 10. The answer is chapter 10 of the IPC, not the CRPC, the Indian Penal Code, which gives power of contempt of lawful authority of public service. It was preventing service of summons, non-attendance of obedience to a permit, non-appearance in response to proclamation, omission to produce documents. Everything is covered in this chapter 10 of the IPC. That's why I want to again emphasize that whenever you see read any enactment, it should not be the substantive section, but it must be the chapter under which it falls. Attention must also be taken to the chapter, whether it is Evidence Act, whether it is the CPC Civil Procedure Code, whether it is the Criminal Procedure Code, whether it is the IPC. Please see the heading of the chapter under which the offence falls so that you can able to understand the difficulty.
So moving to the next question. When an accused is arrested under special law like SC/ST Act or POCSO Act or Prevention of Corruption Act, then the first remand is to be dealt by Ilaka magistrate or the special court itself?
No, the accused is, in case the case is to be committed to the court of session, it will be before the Ilaka magistrate. If it's a complaint case, see, if it's a complaint case, it will be the question. See, please try and understand that in the cases under the Prevention of Corruption Act and the NDPS Act, the person is produced, the case is committed to the court of, the challan is filed directly. It is not committed. But insofar as arrest, detention, and continued, that is to be dealt with by the magistrates. That is why I said that in case you find any lapse, please recommend to the higher court for the taking of due consideration, or make a reference under 395 CRPC to the High Court. Don't take it in a light manner. But when the accused is produced for the purposes of remand, it has to be done by the magistrate. Because that is the pre-trial, because the remand proceedings are not held before the session court. Although there is no committal proceedings in those cases. This is the.
So we have a lot of questions. I'll quickly go to the next one. What should be done in session trialable cases when accused is on a bail and challan still not filed and the police move the application for his discharge on the grounds that no involvement of accused has been found in investigation and cancellation report is filed later on?
No, see, in case he is not to be challan, then see, mostly what the police is doing, they are following the procedure in 167(2) CRPC, 174 CRPC. 167(2). The magistrate to whom an accused person is forwarded under this section may, whether he has or has not jurisdiction to try the case from time to time, authorize the detention of the accused in such custody as the magistrates think fit for a term exceeding 15 days. So 167(2) also is applicable to the previous question which was asked, whether he has the jurisdiction or not. So once he's brought there, then the magistrate is exercises jurisdiction under 167. And under this question, then the second question where he does not have an accused. In the second question, the provision is that since the police report has not been filed, it would be unsafe to rely on the mere statement of the police that he is no offensive. Because the court can take cognizance even at that stage. It can have the jurisdiction even at the stage of on the police report to take cognizance. So at the most at that stage, you can just release him on bail with or without surety or with personal bond. That is the maximum you can use for that. Because unless the police report is filed, from which even though a cancellation report is filed, the court can still take cognizance. Because the court is not a rubber stamp. Whatever the police says we have to use, it may be correct, please do accept it. If it is incorrect, please do take cognizance of it. That Arushi Talwar's case is one of a well-known case which has been brought to highlight, where the CBI had presented a cancellation report, and the magistrate, despite the cancellation report, did take cognizance, and ultimately an acquittal was recorded by the Allahabad High Court. So that is the sole domain of the court to accept or not to accept the cancellation. It cannot act. This is what I'm emphasizing. Don't be mere rubber stamp for police. This is what each case has to be applied. Wherever the police is correct, please accept it. Generally, when the cancellation report is filed, it is more or less accepted. But it should not be made a routine kind of an affair that Hoge and that the magistrate is now to only put his, or magistrate or the session court is only to put the rubber stamp. It has to be exactly.
So next question, whether a special court, while dealing with a complaint under Prevention of Corruption Act, can exercise power under section 156 subpart 3 of CRPC, even if there is no sanction from the competent authority against the public servant arrayed as an accused.
See, I want to clarify that you can take cognizance of the offense. See, I must inform you, sanction for investigation is not necessary. There has been now an amendment in the IPC where the before investigation police have to take sanction under section 17A of the PCI. This is the Prevention of Corruption Act case. Now there's a recent amendment Ask for that. Thank you. Can you hear me, Mr. Gill?
So I can hear you. So I can hear you. So.
There is a provision in the CC Act now. I'll just get a copy.
So I'm just gonna switch on my laptop charger.
Prevention of Corruption Act. I'll just read out. See, there is an amendment where sanction for investigation is also required now.
So I can hear you. So just
you can hear me. I can't see you, but this there is an what I was saying for investigation also sanction is required from the department. Now that this is the provision, but sanction for prosecution is required at the time of taking cognizance. And another thing which have to be kept in mind is that cognizance is taken when the court applies its mind. That is normally when the charge is framed. Because earlier, in this respect, I want all of you to note down this judgment on taking cognizance. AIR 1959 Supreme Court pages 1118. When the court takes cognizance, it is normally when the court applies its mind to the case. So even if you summon a person, that does not mean that you've taken cognizance. That is a stage, right? It is normally when the charge is framed, when you hear both the sides of it. So this sanction is needed for taking cognizance for prosecution. But now, in view of the amendments which have been brought into effect by the amending act, the 17A has been added with effect from 26/7/2018 to the. It says inquiry or investigation of offences relatable to recommendation made or decision taken by public servants in discharge of official functions or duty. No police officer shall conduct an inquiry or investigation into any offences alleged to have been committed by a public servant under this Act, where the alleged offence is relatable to any recommendation made or decision taken by public servant in discharge of his official duty without previous approval in the case of a person employed at the time when the offence was alleged to have been committed in connection with the affairs of the union or the government, in the case of a person who is employed at the time when the offence was alleged to have been committed with the affairs of that government, in the case of any other person or authority competent to remove him from office. So you have to take sanction for investigation also now, in view of the newly amended Section 17A that has been inserted to the Prevention of Corruption Act with effect from 6/7/2018. This is the provision. So even before investigation, the sanction will have to be taken by the police officer. It will apply at both the stages. So you need not go into that 156(3) at that stage. You can straightly put him the question that where is the sanction for investigation under 17A? This is the new amendment that has been brought into effect.
So noted. So moving to the juvenile cases. In juvenile cases, concept of anticipatory bail is not settled much. Can Juvenile Justice Board grant anticipatory bail?
See, there are two conflicting decisions of our High Court on this matter. There are absolutely conflicting, and the matter has been referred to a division bench of the High Court. But see, the concept of bail, you cannot, prima facie, in anticipatory bail can be granted in juvenile justice because where the act is silent on the act, then in terms of section 4(2) CRPC, this is what my subject to what the DB ultimately holds was the same, because on both sides you have two conflicting judgments of the High Court. But see, section 4(2) says that wherever there is no procedure provided, then the procedure under CRPC is to be applicable to the other law. Other law is the Juvenile Justice Act. And when the other law is applied, then 438 also comes in. That is the procedure which is not there in this. So if you apply it in this manner, it definitely would be applicable in my opinion. But this is again subject to what the DB holds. But there are two conflicting or single bench decisions of our High Court. One says that it can be granted, one says it cannot be granted. But none of them have dealt with the provisions of 4(2) read with 438, which I told you in the. See, that's why I'm saying instead of going straight to the judgment, see the bare provision. See, section 4, subsection 2 says CRPC is to apply. If CRPC is to apply, 438 is also good. This is what I want to emphasize.
Sir, whether a complaint warrant case be withdrawn by complainant when it is fixed for consideration on charge?
Whether a complaint case,
whether a complaint warrant case be withdrawn by complainant when it is fixed for consideration on charge.
If a charge is made out and the offence is non-compoundable, then it cannot be done. Section 3, if a prima facie, when it is fixed for charge, then the thing is that if he is to be discharged, he can be discharged. But if he is to be charged and the offence is non-compoundable, then it can be compounded only in accordance with section 320 CRPC. You cannot straightaway just say that now you withdraw. See, this is the mockery. Otherwise, you do this, that this is the blackmailing tactics which are adopted by many complainants, that start a complaint, then blackmail and take money and this thing. The court should not be a party to this game played by this thing. That's why if he wants to withdraw, heavy penalty on him for this thing. It cannot be this. And if at the stage of charge, a charge is made out which is not compoundable, then it cannot be this. 320 would come into play where it is compoundable. And if it is compoundable with the permission of the court, please compound it, but burden him with cost of playing these games.
So, sir, I think you have already answered this question, but just to give a benefit of doubt, I'll still ask this question. Let me know if we have covered this, sir. The session trialable cases cancellation report should be submitted by police before which court? Ilaka magistrate or a session court, and which court will decide it? I think we have answered this question, I believe, sir.
If the cancellation report is to be filed after the investigation is complete, the cancellation report will be filed before the Ilaka magistrate. The Ilaka magistrate will, in case the offence, it can discharge you to accept the report or commit it to the court of session. If the offence. The committal proceedings are provided for in case of this thing 20 commitment to the court of session when offensive tribal exclusively. When in a case instituted on a police report or otherwise, the accused appears or brought before the magistrate, and it appears to the magistrate that the offensive tribal exclusively by the court of session, he shall commit the, after complying with the provisions of 207, 208, as the case may be, to the court of session, and subject to the provisions of this court relating to bail, remand the accused to custody until such commitment has been made. Subject to the provisions relating to bail, remand the accused to custody during and until the conclusion of the trial. Send to the court the record of the case and documents and articles, if any, which are to be produced in any way. Notify the public prosecutor of the burden. So 209, the committal proceedings are to be done by the magistrate. The cancellation report will be filed before the magistrate.
Okay.
If it is case is triable by the court of session, it will go to the session court. That is all everything is very, very clearly written in the CRPC. Only thing is, I request all of you to please read the heading of the chapter and the substantive provision of the chapter. With utmost care, you will get your answer to every query. Don't straight away go to the judgments. Judgments should clarify the position which is already there. Many judgments you will find are just go without considering the statutory provisions. As I had just now pointed out, the cases where the accused was being granted, where the Sessions Court were summoning the accused, for the offence attributed without hearing them. Because the judgment said that since the trial magistrate did not find, but it did not note the statutory provision. Here also now the anticipatory bail of accused, the statutory provisions are not noticed. That is the 4.2 read with 438. Consider those, then no difficulty arises. Therefore, I'm saying please, go to the judgments only when you are unclear from the statutory. This is what, and heading of the chapters must always be seen so that you are able to know at what stage which section applies. And you are not applying section at a different stage and in a different context. I mean, session trial cases, sections are not to be applied in magistrate cases. Warrant cases are not to be applied in this thing. Other than police report cases are not to be applied in police report cases. This is where the heading of the chapter is very, very important, and it must always be noticed and seen, which we failed to.
Sir, recently I was taking a session. I was doing a webinar with the Maharashtra Judicial Academy and other state judiciaries. And I think, I think you have, said it a couple of times that judgment should be the last. Facts, then the law, and then the judgment. I think this is the same thing I've heard. And this is the third time I'm hearing this same statement. So I think all the learned members are on the same lines.
No, because this is what is happening. We are going too much because the lawyers come. Lawyer comes and he starts his argument by stating that, my lord, your honor, this is covered by this judgment. And the magistrate and the session court, they find an easy way out. Oh, if it's covered, my case would be disposed of. But then, as you read it, it soon starts getting discovered rather than covered.
So I'll move to the next one. Can a successor magistrate court rectify the wrong procedure adopted by a predecessor magistrate court in criminal complaints, especially complaints under section 340 of CRPC?
The successor court can do it by successor court. It depends. What happened in case of summary cases, it was said in 1962 in Pyare Lal's case that the successor magistrate cannot do it because in summary cases the gist of the evidence is to be taken. So the magistrate who's trying the case was doing it, and they said if the magistrate is transferred, he has to go and de novo trial. But that Pyare Lal's case was followed in 1999, I think. I'm not offhand aware, but I can search. But in fact, the Pyare Lal's case of 62 Supreme Court was under the old CRPC. And the new CRPC, somewhere in 97, I will find that judgment and I will send it to whoever that question is asked for. I'll give it to you. It said that that was under the old CRPC. When the later view came, it overlooked this judgment which had come in between. So they again followed Pyare Lal's case and they said, sir. So in warrants cases and summons cases, there is no dispute that the successive magistrate can take over from whatever stage. In summary cases, there is this confusion which has caused, but it can be done even in summary cases because of the fact that in summary cases, that judgment which came in between was overlooked and the judgment of Pyare Lal in old CRPC was. This is what has happened. So even in no dispute regarding warrants and summons case, only grey area in summary cases which created the confusion. But I will send the judgments. I'm not having them offhand.
So is it Pyare Lal versus State of Punjab 1962 case?
62 Supreme Court.
Just so the citation, I have a couple of citations. It's 1962, Volume 3, SCR 328. And I have a AIR citation right now handy with me. That is AIR 1962 SC 690.
Now, where has this been followed? If you just see it.
So I'll just see it. So you're looking at with all cases it was followed? Are we looking at it which all cases? So I'll just check. So it's a 1961 judgment. So it has been used in 3 cases, 2 cases rather, one in Supreme Court and one in Bombay High Court.
Supreme Court is which year? 97?
So 1977 and 1985. Actually, there are 2 cases. Yes. So in 2 cases, one is Nirmal Singh versus State of Haryana. That's a 1977 case, and the other one is Ranbir Yadav versus State of Bihar.
This Ranbir Yadav case, this has been dissented.
This yes, this is distinguished. Yes, so this is distinguished.
Ranbir Yadav case, it is distinguished in view of the new CRPC coming into effect. So then it is again followed somewhere in 97 without noticing this Ranbir Yadav case. This is how it is.
Okay. I couldn't really find that one, sir. So maybe
I know it. I don't remember it offhand, but I'm quite sure. What happened that in fact it is inapplicable in the new CRPC. So okay, therefore there is some confusion on the continuing from the stage at which it is. In the case of summons cases, in the case of summary cases, but there is no dispute regarding warrants and summons cases that the magistrate can take. This is the position.
Okay, sir. I'll move to the next question, sir. What is the right for a magistrate to do if warrants are required by police, but in view of judgment of Honorable High Court? This is okay. It's I couldn't really understand the meaning myself. I'll repeat the question. I think the question is incomplete. It says what is the right for the magistrate to do if the warrants are required by police, but in view of judgment of Honorable High Court?
Honorable High Court, granting bail. I think it must be granting bail or something. It should be.
I think it's just to do with the warrants, but I think the question is incomplete. I will request the member to just please repost the question so we can at least have the answer to this. So in the meantime, I'll move to the next one. Whether anticipatory bail is in juvenile cases is maintainable.
That I've just
That we have
I've
actually
just said, Surna, that there are two sets of
two
domain.
different judgments. Yes.
Single bench there, the different, and the matter has been referred to a DB by Justice Anil Kshetrapal, and it should be get clarity. But in my view, if you read section 4(2) Redway 438, then it would be maintainable, even if, because whatever is not provided for in the other law, the CRPC is. This is what happened.
So, and moving to the next one, in cases where an interim bail is granted by Honorable High Court and sent to magistrate, what procedure if surety has already stood surety in some other case and not mentioned in the affidavit? Can a magistrate call for a fresh surety and return them to produced on a next day?
No, that can be done, very much done, but there is no bar for a surety to continue as such. He can be surety in more than one case. That is not a, there's no such, unless that surety is of disrespectful character or not, or is otherwise wanting, but there can be no bar as such to the surety.
Sir, member is asking for that what kind of factors can be considered to exercise the discretion while granting bail?
What kind of factors can be considered? See, factors, one is the nature and gravity of the offense. Second, his availability for the trial, the likelihood of his absconding, and this thing. I have written a full bench, the High Court in Deep Singh alias Deepa, in which I have mentioned various kind of factors which can be taken into account. It's a full bench of our High Court, Deep Singh alias Deepa versus State of Punjab, where two judgments of the High Court were considered. One is in the case of Daler Singh, and the other is in the case of Dharampal. The judgment in Dharampal says that whenever a person who has been convicted for an offence under 302 and is sentenced to life imprisonment, he has undergone imprisonment of 5 years, out of which 3 years should be after conviction, then he should get bail because his appeal is not being filed. Similar is the provision in Daler Singh's case in respect of offences under the NDPS Act. While giving those cases, various parameters I have discussed which can be considered for the grant of bail. That judgment in Deep Singh alias Deepa versus State of Punjab, full bench judgment, which is also by me. You can go through, but these latest judgments which I am giving you of the Supreme Court, these give out further factors, which one is this Sushila Agarwal versus State and City of Delhi 2020 Volume 5 SCC 1 and the
2020 SEC Online SC 8071.
Parvez Noordin Lokhandwala. These are later judgments which are, very, very how to deal with these matters. Very enlightening, and they give a very broad picture on these aspects of the case.
So I've also copied the citation in the chat. So members who want the citation of these judgments, two judgments that you mentioned, can also make a note of it. I've also mentioned.
Parvez Noordin Lokhandwal, the citation 2020 SEC Online SC 807.
Yes, sir. I've already mentioned.
SC Online SC 807.
Yes,
and
sir.
Sushila Agarwal is 2020 Volume 5 SCC page 1.
Page 1. So already mentioned, sir. Already mentioned in the charts. So this brings us to the last question of the session. Sir, if upon bail granted by Honorable High Court, the order mentions very clearly that undertaking needs to be taken. However, the advocate refuses to give them, then how a court should proceed further?
If undertaking needs to be given for what? For the grant of bail?
That has not been written. That's not been clarified over here. It's for bail. Bail granted. Upon for bail granted by Honorable High Court.
Undertaking to the effect that while on bail he would maintain peace and good behavior. What is the nature of undertaking that has been asked for?
Okay. I think, sir, if you want, I can repeat a question that makes sense. So it says upon bail granted. So bail has already been granted by the Honorable High Court. And while the bail was granted, the order mentions that undertaking has to be taken. In that, and when the undertaking needs to be taken, the advocate refuses to give them, and then how should we proceed? This is the question.
What is the undertaking that is required?
I will then ask the member to, if your member can put a clarifying question, answer the question.
If of doubt, the reference can be made to the High Court. Again, under 395 CRPC, nothing to this thing. Reference can be 395. Which is, I'm telling you, those very provisions which are rarely used by the courts. Like I told you, of the power of contempt. You know, everyone thinks that anything happens, we have to refer the case to the High Court for contempt. Whereas the court itself has various powers under Chapter 10 of the IPC. Of the contempt of lawful authority. This is where the power lies with the court itself, without reference to the these you could able to do it at your own level rather than, you know, refer the High Court.
So this question, we have now two more questions at the end. This question has been asked in some previous webinars as well. It's about narcotic drugs. So a person was apprehended with the possession of 15 types of narcotic drugs, having quantity which was on the borderline of non-commercial quantity, that is 1,000 grams. Now, if will this quantity be considered as non-commercial or commercial?
Normally, in these cases, benefit of doubt should be given for non-commercial, because the law leans in favor of the accused. But I'm not aware of any judgment in this regard. But now the latest judgment which has come of 3 judges regarding the basis of going on the quantity of the judgment or quantity of the material. E. Michael Raj was there earlier, which said that you have to see the gravity or the substance irrespective of the quantity.
Okay.
So now they said they have relied on the notification that the 3 judges bench has come very recently, which says that it has to be on the basis of the
type of drug,
or the quantity of the material that is recovered.
Okay.
And in a division bench judgment, which I had said in that case of Inderjeet Singh alias Latti versus State of Punjab, 1998 RCR, it is reported in. In that also, I had said the same thing, that it was based on the notification. The Supreme Court, it was expected, would go on a different thing, and it would not be confined to a notification because it is in the nature of a legislative act. But the Supreme Court has now clarified and overruled the decision in E. Michael Raj. These are 3 judges, latest judgment.
So right now I have one more question, and I'm waiting for the clarification of the question bail granted by Honorable High Court. But before that, one more question, that is, can prohibition be granted where minimum sentence is prescribed, especially in context to offences under Excise Act, when recovery is less than, that is, 25 bottles?
It can be granted in cases of Excise Act. Even there's this judgment in 1972 Supreme Court that on the excise matter, I don't know it offhand, but it is there 1972 probation. Just check on that. It's again a case of State of Punjab only.
So I think, sir, I haven't got the response to the other question. So I think that brings us to the end of this webinar. Before I think
that other question was in relation to the fact, undertaking being given. That is what it was.
Yes, sir. It was talking about undertaking being taken by and the advocate refused to give the undertaking.
But undertaking in what context? I'm not.
That's what I asked the member. I don't even have the name of the member. It's anonymously joined, so I can't even address the member. But I think what I can do is, if the member can hear me, and if there is some issue that the person is.
I'll give you the judgments in the context of that Pyara Lal case.
Okay, sir.
Forwarded them to the concerned questionnaire, because it's only in those cases. I'll just tell you the judgments where this has happened. Otherwise, you can join at any stage, even in those cases of summary cases. That is.
Sir, certainly, sir. So I think this brings us to the end of the session. It's been, it doesn't look like, but it's been 2 hours that you've been here with us. And I think I think even for the members, it's a non-working day and members have taken out time. I think because if the members are not here, the session is of no use. But I think just to put it on record, sir, they were approximately 300.
But I wish one could see the members also.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. This is the reason I think we've been talking to Chandigarh Judicial Academy for the same lines, that there's a constraint that if the members are going beyond 300, then we cannot do face-to-face interaction. But if the members are less than 300, then we can do face-to-face interaction, because it's a system.
Have different sessions, for in a group of say 50-50 or so would be ideal, 50-25, and then you can have a better interaction in that manner, and there's no difficulty.
Sir, I've been in talks with Balram sir, and Balram sir was also thinking on the same line. So I think we're figuring it out, a method that we can break it into smaller capsules so that members can see it. So I, being a trainer myself, I totally understand when you say that, you can't get the pulse of the members, and it's always good to see how the members are reacting and listen to them, have an interactive session. It's noted, sir. It is noted, and I think we'll come up with something better. If not this webinar. But sir, I think I will end this session. I will give a small word of thanks, but I'll not say my word. I'll read out to something which has been in the chat, and it's been on the top from the starting. It says, thank you, Lordship, for your time, and thank you for enriching us through this webinar and guiding us as always. So I think that's always been the situation, and I'm really, really thankful to you, sir, for taking out time. Thank you so much for listing down the citations, listing down all this. I think this session is for 2 hours, and I say these things, in all these webinars, because this session is only for 2 hours, but the effort, the experience that you have brought in these 2 hours, and squeezed it in 2 hours. It's really, really, I think we can only be thankful to you, if not anything else. So
I would request all the members who are here to kindly read these judgments which I have told you, especially that Vinu Bhai citation I gave you on the subsequent trial. To kindly go and please have the CRPC with you always. That's what I will. Nothing will, no difficulty will come up.
So I think that'll be a note that we'll take from you. And so on behalf of Chandigarh Judicial Academy, on behalf of all the members who have joined in, I, Chetan Singh Gill, I would like to thank you. And I think on behalf of the Academy, I would also like to thank all the members who joined in today. Just for the reference, this webinar was being recorded. So this webinar will also be available on Chandigarh Judicial Academy website as a video. So we can refer to it as and when it's required. So anything that you would like to say before we end the session?
Thank you so much. I would like to thank all the participants who have spent their time, and I only hope that it did help them in this. Thank you, sir.
Sir, thank you, sir. With your permission, sir, we'll end this session now, sir.
Thank you.
So, thank you, sir.